Good. Welcome. Thanks for being here. Welcome those online. Thanks for tuning in. My name, if we haven't met, is Bradley Hamilton, and I'm our family engagement pastor. That does not mean that I can help you get engaged. I'm sorry, I've gotten that question before, can't help there. But what that does mean is I get the privilege of overseeing all of our family ministries. So anytime a couple has a child, all the way through when that child will graduate and move on to whatever's next. And so I get to see our kids programs, I get to see our student programs. And I have 2 toddler boys myself, ages 2 and 3. So if I look tired, I am. And then I have an amazing wife who holds it all together. And even though my wife is amazing, we are different. I don't know if anyone is a little bit different than their partner in the room. But we're different in a few ways. For one, I'm more of a night person. I like to stay up late. She's a little bit more of a morning person. She can just kind of jump up and be in a better mood. I like to drive when we go places because I like control. And I'm talking to someone about it, don't worry. She's fine hanging out and not doing the driving and taking the role of passenger princess. But I can't say that anymore because now that we have 2 toddlers in the back, now she is like snack giver-outer and tablet technologist. And so that's what she does a lot while we're driving. But we're different in that way. I love movies, and she loves to sleep through movies. And so that's something that we sometimes get to do together. I'm the planner in the relationship. I love planning. I need to know where we're going, times, all of that. Again, the control thing, I got it. So I like to really plan. Jamie's totally fine allowing more room for leniency and, if we don't hit certain things, that's fine. And so I'm trying to get better about that. But it was actually very apparent when we first met and we started dating. I loved planning out our dates. I loved it. I loved deciding where we're gonna go and making times and reservations and all of that. And she was perfectly fine not planning any of them. And so she was like, listen, this stresses me out. How about you plan all of our dates and I don't? And I was like, that actually sounds great. And so for pretty much most of our marriage up and even till now, that's how it goes. I like to plan dates and she likes to kind of just show up. And what that turned into is me deciding that a lot of these I should just make surprises. And so for most of our dates, even early on, I wasn't telling her what we were doing. I would just kind of say what to wear and where to be when. And she's actually great with that. She says that she loves it, whether she does or not. We're still doing that for most of our dates. And for the most part, I've been pretty spot on. There have been a couple of times where I didn't tell her the right type of shoes to wear because apparently women have more than one type of shoe and things like that. So I haven't always gotten that right. But there was one date that we went on when we were engaged. And our wedding was just around the corner. And I thought I would plan something a little different, a little bit more extravagant than we normally planned, a little bit adventurous. And she's a pretty adventurous person. And so I thought it would be a great idea to plan a trip to Cloudland Canyon, which if you don't know, that's near where we were living in Georgia at the time. And it's a canyon with caves underneath where you can go natural cave diving and spelunking. And so I planned this trip. I was very excited about it, and I didn't tell her. And so we're on the way there. It's a several-hour drive. She's guessing all these really sweet things like horseback riding and, walking through the woods. And we get there, and I'm so excited. We're in the parking lot, and there's nothing there because it's below us. And so I'm really excited to tell her what we're about to do. And I let her know, and turns out she wasn't as excited as I was about this. In fact, she essentially had what was a panic attack in front of me in the car, and I'm just going, what have I done? And she's not wanting, apparently this was not on her bucket list of things to do. And it's paid for. We're about to start in 10 minutes. I don't know what to do. I don't even know if I have a wife anymore. I don't know. And so she agrees that let's at least walk in, let's get suited up, let's talk to them, ask them some questions. And so she shakily walks to the booth and they get us suited up and she agrees to let's give this thing a try. And so we begin our descent into the cave. And I actually brought a photo to show you a little bit of what it looks like. It's hard to see. It is straight down for a very long time, and you have to slide on your butt over multiple rocks to get down there. And she's smiling in that picture. I can assure you that was not the emotion of the moment, but she looks very happy there. And so once we get down, I gotta be honest, it was even more intense than I thought. I didn't think I had claustrophobia, but it kind of kicks in. There were spaces where you would have to crawl through. We're on our hands and knees a lot. Actually brought another picture of just a little bit of what it would look like inside. Again, that's not the smallest area we had to crawl through, but it was a lot of spaces like that. And what was really fun is there's rivers down there too, so some of them have water running through them. So if you like tight spaces and water combined, it's your thing. And it was pretty intense. Now, some of it was hard in the moment. We were nervous, but it ended up being obviously an incredible experience. And what we got to see once you actually got through some of these obstacles to the right places, and I brought one of the rooms that we got to finally walk into. I mean, they're incredible, and it's things that not very many people get to see. And so it ended up being an incredible trip. And I still got married a couple weeks later, so that's good. But there was this one moment where the guide said there's a cardinal rule when it comes to caving. So if you want to do this more, shocker, we didn't end up doing it anymore, but if you want to keep doing this, he said there's this cardinal rule. So if you go into a new cave or a new route that you haven't taken, the cardinal rule is you always go with someone who has been before. Always go with someone who's been before. That's because they've seen the route. They've seen the potential dangers. They've experienced what it's going to be like in certain areas. They know what's around the corner. If there's certain things you need to avoid, they know that. Maybe they've taken the wrong paths before and know which paths to not go down. And they help you not get lost because they have a better mental image of what it all looks like. Always go with someone who's been before. For whatever reason, since saying that, that has just stuck with me because I think that's just a good rule for life. And I think, look back on our lives and some of our decisions, and wouldn't it have been better if someone who had been there before, you'd been able to bring alongside and listen to and maybe avoid some of the big regrets that we've fallen into? And some of you, that's been your story. You've had people along the way who have helped advise and helped guide and helped been there because they've just experienced it before. And your life has been better and you have had less regrets because you were willing to be humble and to listen to somebody else and bring someone else along the ride who's been there. And the guy in the cave said, that's really the difference between having a potential catastrophic experience and a really beautiful, enjoyable one. I just thought, what if that's the difference in life? Between a potentially catastrophic experience and one that we can enjoy. What would it look like if that was our cardinal rule? I want to talk about the next generation. And you're going, yeah, of course, because you're the next generation guy, and I get it. But I want to talk about the generation that's coming up behind us. The kids, the students, the kids in our families, the kids in our neighborhoods, the students in our church and our community, the generation behind us adults. Because what if we could be those guides for them? What if there was a generation of kids and students who could avoid regret, who could avoid traveling some paths that we know we've been down and we don't want them to make the same mistakes? What if we could be the people who are looking at them to say, I know it's scary, I know you don't know what's next, been around the corner, but we have, and we're here for you, and we'll go with you. In fact, I want to take it a step farther. I think that every single adult in this room or watching online has the ability to change destinies. Now, that sounds really overdramatic, but I say that because there was a study done by Fuller that I quote all the time, but they wanted to look at these stories where people ended up in successful places, but started out in really challenging circumstances. So they did all these case studies on individuals who had success financially, with business, with relationships, but then started out in broken homes or in poverty. And their goal was to figure out if there's some things that were similar in those stories. Maybe we can help replicate those and help other kids and students who are dealing with some of these same challenges. And so as they pulled all of these case studies together, they found out that they were all completely different. There was no story that was the same, just like the person next to you, their story is totally different than yours. But what they found was that there was one consistent denominator in every single story, one consistent element in every single one. And it was a caring adult. Caring adult. Where somewhere along the way, as they were a student, as they were a kid, a caring adult showed up in their life and leveraged, just out of the goodness of their heart, what they had to inspire or to help. And it completely changed the destination for these individuals. And I don't know, this was a few years ago. I don't know if you follow trends on what it's like to be a child or a teen today. I do, just because that's my job. And I gotta be honest, it's not encouraging. There's a lot of groups who do these studies. Barna's one of them, and what they have been tracking year over year is that each year we are seeing increased rates of suicide and depression, increased rates of addiction, new addictions created because of online and what that's doing to the brain, where there's very little resources, very little understanding, even for the adults helping out. So it's kind of a whole new area they're trying to figure out. There's increased rates of bullying, increased rates of biblical illiteracy, and increased rates of complete religious disinterest. And so here's my question. If that is happening in our culture, and the answer is caring adults, then I think this has to be personal to us. I think, especially as Christ followers, I think this needs to be our call. And I get that the pushback immediately is, yeah, but I'm in this stage of life, and how can I relate to a kid or a teen, or I just don't get along with them or whatever. And I get all of that, okay? And I'm not asking all of you to be a small group leader to a 6th grade boys group. But I do think that all of us have the potential to leverage something in our lives for the next generation. And to seriously not be dramatic, I think it could be the difference in changing a life forever. So I know it's a big undertaking, but what I'd like to do is this morning, I just want to talk through 3 ways that I think we can all begin to invest in the next generation. 3 ways, hopefully there'll be kind of simple, practical steps for us all, but something that we can do to begin to leverage our lives for the next generation. And I want to look at this through a guy named Paul. And Paul, you've probably heard him before, especially if you've been in church for any amount of time. He wrote most of our New Testament. What you might not know is that his entire life was a story of ups and downs. Talk about experiences. He starts off just rising the ranks of Jewish leadership, saw excellence there, gained influence, gained affluence, had an incredible life. And then this guy named Jesus shows up. And Jesus shows up, poor guy from an obscure village, and he says, I am the Jewish God. And this upset, obviously, a lot of people. And so he begins to have some followers, and people are listening to him and traveling with him and claiming that he's doing miracles. But still, that's not really that big of a threat, because there were other cults, there were other leaders saying that they were God, and that's just sort of normal. They never made our history books. But this one guy in particular began to just grow these masses, and as he just pushed up and up against more of Jewish leadership, they said, you know what, let's just put an end to this one. Let's put an end to this one, and it'll be easy, because to end a cult, you just kill their leader, right? So that's what they did. And they wanted to make it public. They wanted to show that the leader was killed, he wasn't God, because gods don't die, and so very, very publicly, in front of everyone, let's kill the leader, and this should all be over. And it worked. After Jesus died, no more Christ followers. They all left, they ran, they were scared now because they could be next, and they gave up because gods don't die. But then something began to happen, because all of a sudden, what they thought was going to end the thing actually grew like never before. Because now you had hundreds of eyewitnesses who began to run back into the streets. And they were telling the religious leaders, no, you got it wrong. Because we watched him die, you made sure that we did, and that we saw him again. And we talked with him, and we spent time with him. And now we are so convinced. You can kill us if you want, you can torture us if you want. We are so convinced that he is the God that he said he was, because he said he would raise again, and we saw it happen. And so this movement that was supposed to be over exploded. And eyewitnesses and people who saw and were part of it began to go to other towns and other places and spread more of what was happening. And as followers grew and grew, Paul and other religious leaders said, well, we've got to do something now, so let's just kill anyone who says the name of Jesus. Let's kill anyone who would claim to have seen him rise again because they're the ones now causing this issue. And so that's what he was doing. That was his career path. And as he's doing that, he would say, this is Paul, he would say that he met Jesus. Just like everyone else was claiming, the same Jesus that he helped kill, he got to experience. And for Paul, okay, it's one thing to say that. He just decided, he's so convinced, he gave up everything. He gave up his leadership. He gave up his affluence. He gave up his comfortable life. He gave up his circles because now he was outcast from anyone else who he used to spend time with. He gave up absolutely everything. And he went and he spent time with the disciples and he said, teach me about this guy because I need to know more. I saw him, so I'm just convinced I believe now. And then this Paul would trade in his life of affluence for a life of torture and misery and hardship and poverty, all because he was convinced. And then the same guy started to realize, well, I have leadership skills and let's figure this thing out. And so he began to help churches, groups of people gather together in churches all over the place. Believers who were following after Jesus. And he wrote letters to them in correspondence of, here's how we figure this out. And here's how we apply Jesus' words to our situation. And what's so cool is we have most of those in our New Testament as letters written from Paul to these different churches that he was leading. So a world of experience. But then even Paul knew that it can't end with me. And it's not just about my leadership and what I'm doing in this world and my career path and my influence, but there's others coming up behind me. And so he connects with a guy named Timothy. And Timothy was a young leader who he begins to say, come alongside of me. Learn from me. Let's figure this out together. In fact, I'm going to send you to help lead over some other gatherings of people as they figure out what it looks like to follow after Jesus. And as he writes to him these letters, we get these letters in the books of our Bible, 1st and 2nd Timothy. So we kind of get to see their relationship unfold. And I think there's a few things that we get to see between the two of them that I think is so helpful when it comes to what does it look like for us to leverage influence into the next generation. So that's what I want to talk about. 3 ways to invest in the next generation. The first is your words. Your words have more power than you know. In fact, here's what Paul writes to Timothy in 1 Timothy 4:12. He looks at them and he says, don't let anyone look down on you because you are young. Set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. Man, I just imagine Timothy, a young, scared church planter. And it's not like church planting in today's culture where it's acceptable. It was going completely against culture, completely against authorities. It was a dangerous place to be in. It was not a life of luxury. And he was younger than everybody else. And then you have Paul, who's helped establish these churches, who's seen as a hero of the faith. Tell Timothy, don't let anyone look down on you. And you've got this. You have potential. I see this in you. I think what Paul realizes is that words are powerful. They are. We try and tell ourselves they aren't, right? We have the whole saying of sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never hurt me. The problem is that's not true. Because sitting here right now, you have words that have hurt you. You have words that were spoken over you when you were a kid, maybe on the playground, that if you were to be honest, still impact your decisions today and still impact how you view yourself. Maybe there were words from the generation above you that has completely shaped almost everything about you. And you're trying to pick up the pieces and you're trying to move forward, but it wasn't that they didn't hurt. But the opposite's also true. Because maybe you've had people in your life that just spoke something over you that changed everything for you. That totally unlocked a way you didn't even see your potential. That changed the way you viewed your entire identity. Maybe there were some people that just came alongside of you, and because they spoke life, your kid's life are completely different and changed. Our words have so much more weight than we think. So the question is, adults, how are we speaking about the next generation? I mean, what if we even change that? Because I get it. I mean, I don't know what they're doing with those TikTok dances either. Like, I don't understand. But it's easy to go, well, they just don't have jobs, even though they're making more on social media than most of us. It's easy to go, well, I get all of it. But what we might not realize is that just by talking the way we talk about the next generation, we're speaking harm and things over them that will hold them back. Instead of, what if we spoke life? What if we called out their potential? What if we pointed out the things in this generation? Let me just tell you, they are so creative. They're incredibly creative. They are passionate. They are so willing to listen to different types of views and accept people no matter what. They can mobilize like you wouldn't believe. What if we just spoke like that about them? I think right there we'd see some influence and some kids and some students who finally feel like they can do something because they have life being spoken into them. But then this also goes to the question of what are we saying to them? How are we talking to them in interactions with kids, in interactions with students? And now listen, I know it can be tough because some of you, the question is, are we even speaking to them? Right? Like, do we just avoid them altogether? And I get that. And then teens in the room, can I just tell you, sometimes adults are really afraid of you. It's just true, okay? They don't understand your haircut and they're freaked out, okay? And listen, we don't have to be, okay? It's just part of the dynamic. So I get it. And I get the intimidation and all of that. But what I don't want to have happen is for us to feel like because we are different and we don't see eye to eye, that means there is nothing we can learn from one another. Because adults, let me tell you, you can learn some things from these kids and students. And kids and students, I know you don't want to hear it, you can learn some things from them too. Because they have been there. And they have seen some things to avoid. And maybe you could avoid so much if we just begin to have interaction and conversation. Now, adults, here's what I'm not saying. I'm not saying you find a teenager after service and corner them in the lobby, okay? Ask them about their life. Please don't do that. It's just creepy, okay? So don't do that. That's not what I'm saying. But what would it look like to just be willing to engage? And be willing to meet and to have some conversations. And I get it's well, where do I start? And what do I say? And what does that mean? And I don't think you have to say much. In fact, I had a pastor I used to work with say that conversation about anything is what leads to conversation about everything. So in other words, it's just, maybe just engage them around what is that app and help me understand it and what is that like? Or, what's school like and what are your interests and hobbies and what is it like to be a kid or a student these days in culture? And maybe as you begin to have conversations about just anything, when it's time for them to seek out some safe adults, maybe they'll remember they built trust there to find some safety. So number one is our words. Number two, we can leverage our resources. We can deposit resources that we have that the next generation does not. Here's how Paul describes it with Timothy. He says, what you heard from me, keep as a pattern of sound teaching with faith and love in Jesus Christ. Guard the good deposit that was entrusted to you. Guard it with the help of the Holy Spirit who lives in us. What's clear here and what's clear throughout their letters is that their relationship was one of Paul continually going, how can I give to Timothy? How can I leverage my connections, my time, my things, my everything to leverage for the success of Timothy? Not just to hold on to it, but so that someone else coming up behind me might thrive. And so with the resources that we have, what would it look like to leverage those, not just for us, but that there could be a teen or a student who could thrive in the world that they're about to enter into? Now, obviously, there's a lot of different ways you can define resources. One of them is maybe the one our brains go to first, and that's financial resources, because they don't have those often. You know who doesn't give to the church? Kids. I've never once had one bring in a big check. That's just not... I'm open to it, but it hasn't happened yet. You know who doesn't give to the church? Teenagers. And I love you, but they don't. Some do, obviously, but it's like they don't have a lot, and we understand that. But they are still deserving of places and programs that can help them explore faith, that can give them experiences, that can give them opportunities to build community and meet leaders and maybe establish the foundation for their entire lives. They deserve to have safe places where they aren't kicked out because of their questions, but where they are welcomed in. They deserve to have safe places where they can figure out the nuances of life and what that would even look like to follow after Jesus. They deserve those places. But let me just let you into a little secret. You are footing the bill for that. We don't get outside funding from any other source or denomination. That's not how it works. All of our kids' programming, all of our experiences, all of our Wednesday night student programming, all of that, the ability to give them fun and connect them with other people and give them these moments, all comes from just us, our generosity. And here's why that's important. I just want you to see that when you give here, you are depositing into the next generation. And what that means is that every time you see a kid baptized, you can see a direct link back to you. Every time you hear of a student who had a story of life change, that's because of you. Because of those deposits, you're making a big difference. Now, there are several in the room even who I'm not going to point out because they wouldn't want me to do that, but they even came to me last summer. And as we were getting ready to attend camp, camp is one of those moments where for our student ministry, it is truly a game changer. It is where students can have a place to step aside and unplug and ask questions and wrestle with faith, but then meet some leaders and students that are potentially lifelong friendships and community. And we always see that as a big catalyst for their faith lives moving forward. And so just because of camp and what it is, it's a high price tag, and not anyone can just send one or two or three kids to it. And so we had several families who were struggling to get all the way there so that we could get them to camp. And I had several people in our church just go, hey, how can I sponsor? How can I help? And with just a few sponsors, we were able this past summer to send 16 kids to camp, either on full or partial scholarship. 16. And then here's where my job is so unfair. I got to, because the donors want to be anonymous, obviously. I got to call those families and tell them, hey, I know you didn't think your kid was going to be able to go to camp. Actually, here's the remaining balance, and we're going to be able to get you there. Or I know the sibling wasn't able to come. Now we're able to allow the sibling to be with your other child as well. And as I got to have those conversations, I got to experience their joy, their tears in often cases, this just move of God they already felt was being set up through these miracles and bringing in the funds to do this. And then, again, it's so unfair. Then I got to go back to the donors after camp and tell them the stories of kids they sponsored that accepted Christ, they were baptized, they made huge decisions in their life, and many who are plugged in now today just because their first experience was camp. And man, these are anonymous sponsors who don't know these kids, not even part of our student ministry. They still don't know who they are. And yet they were willing to leverage a resource they had that is forever changing destinies. And so I get it might not be finances for you. But what are some things that we have a resource we can leverage? I have someone who donates snacks every Wednesday to make our snack area just incredible at students. And if you've spent any time around a teenager, you know that that's actually like the work of Jesus is snacks. So they bring those, and that's been incredible. There's a leader in our kids ministry who has these really cool Bibles that they give out to kids who need them. What would that look like? And maybe it's not that, maybe it's connections. Because you've lived for a while, and you have a network of people that you know, and maybe some kids and students in your community or around you don't have those. And so maybe you're not the answer to whatever that neighborhood child is going through, but maybe you know someone who is. And you can bring in this wealth of resources that you have that's just connections to other people. And maybe you can begin to help and step into a space that's potentially life-changing. So it's our words, it's our resources. And then lastly, and I love this one, and you're going to see it in this verse. It's going to sound like a weird verse in a second, but hang with me. In 2 Timothy 1, 3-5, he says this: I thank God, whom I serve, as my ancestors did, with a clear conscience. As night and day, I constantly remember you in my prayers, recalling you in my tears. I long to see you so that I may be filled with joy. I am reminded of your sincere faith, which first lived in your grandma Lois and in your mother Eunice, and I am persuaded now lives in you also. So I just love this verse because he's writing this public letter to Timothy, and then he goes, oh, also shout out to Granny Lois. But what's obvious in this passage, as Paul is going, I know your family, I know your story. I've spent time in prayer over you. I've spent time in tears over you and what's going on. Like, it's very obvious that Paul had been depositing time into Timothy. And that's the third thing that we have the opportunity to deposit as well. It's our time. Time's one of those things that's so valuable. It is so precious, and it should be. But we also all have it. And what would maybe just leveraging a couple hours of your time potentially do in the life of the next generation? I want to embarrass a few people in the room. And can I just ask, and I mean this, because like first service, some didn't stand, and I know who you are. So if you serve currently in kids ministry or our student ministry, any capacity, worship, production, if you are serving in our kids or student areas, could you stand for me? And I mean really stand. Don't make me say your name. I know you. Really stand. Yeah. Keep standing. Don't sit for me. Nope, Shelly, keep standing. I need to say this because this is important. And then that clap, and I love it, and I appreciate it truly. But that doesn't even come close to what these individuals deserve as a thank you for what they do. I could just go around the room and share stories of each of these individuals and all that they are doing to give up their time to leverage for the next generation. But I don't want to take up 3 hours of your time, okay? That's Bryant. I'm going to be quick. I love you, boss. But truly, I could go around the room, and here's just what I want to say. For those sitting looking at these standing, they don't do this because I pay really well, because I don't. They don't do this because the pizza is that good on Wednesday night, because it's not. They just do this because they have said yes to being a caring adult. The number one difference maker they know. They can impact a life, and they have said yes to that. And so I just want to tell you guys who are giving up hours of your week, week in and week out, you're changing destinies forever more than you know. And so thank you. Thank you. Now you can go ahead and have a seat if you want. And again, I want to share all their stories, and often I do to friends of mine. A lot of you don't even know you're being talked about all the time, but I just can't help it. But just one I wanted to highlight for a moment because I thought this was so cool recently is about a year and a half ago, there was a couple with 2 teenagers, and they approached me and said, we want our teens to be in church, and we want to maybe consider serving as small group leaders, Jack and Carrie. And they weren't sure what that looked like or what that meant, and so they began small group leading in our student ministry. And over the last year and a half, what's so cool to see is their kids have just begun to love the program, and they've started to invite their friends, which is always a good sign. And so they're inviting their friends, and then they're telling their sports teams about it. And so there's even group me's going on between all of them and their sports teams about who's coming here. But what that meant for Jack and Carrie was that now they're like the liaison for all these kids to get to a Wednesday night. And so they started like talking about schedules and who can pick up and drop off. And they were driving some, and they were communicating to parents. Some of those parents are now attending, and there was all of this coordination. So not only are they giving up time every single Wednesday from everything else they could be doing, they're now spending extra time before and after and throughout the week, all in just helping kids coordinate, right? But then what was so cool is a couple weeks ago, we had our Fright Night event, which is why in this photo, they're all dressed up in costumes. This is a normal thing we do on Wednesdays, don't worry. But they're all dressed up, and what was so cool, she took this photo, and then she just stopped and looked at it and said, these are all the kids who started coming because we invited them and because my kids invited them. All because of Jack and Carrie and their family just putting in time. And you want to tell me that time doesn't have the potential to change the next generation? That photo behind me shows that there's lives who will forever be different because they're willing to take the time. And again, I could keep going. I could talk about a student who opened up to a small group leader for the first time after 2 years of seemingly nothing. I could talk about the kids who are inviting their small group leaders in our kids ministry, inviting their small group leaders to school events or to lunches or to big moments in their life because they've just become so close with them. But the important thing is time matters and investment matters. And it's making a difference. There was one moment in the cave where there was a spot we had to crawl through that was kind of crawling through on your belly. And it was just dark and you couldn't see the other side. And he assured me it was only like 6 or 7 feet, but he could have been lying, I didn't trust him yet. And everyone's just disappearing into it. And I think he sensed how nervous I was becoming. I think I made my wife go first too. We still got married, listen, it's fine. And I think he see I was hesitant. And he just said this to me. He said, listen, I know you can fit through it because I'm a little bit bigger than you and I fit through it. And so I've done it. I know you can. I promise you can do it. And I did. As I was halfway through, I was like, he's done it, I can. He's done it, I can. And found the other side. It turns out it was only about 6 feet, maybe 7. It was 7 feet. But I get through the other side, and I just remember him saying that, and it gave me the confidence to do what felt impossible. Because I just really think there is a generation of kids and students who it would change everything if someone just came alongside of them and said, hey, listen, I know it looks tough, but I've been there and I'm with you and you've got it. I think it would change everything. In fact, this is my story. I've had so many people in life invest in me and just deposit into my life, no doubt. But one of those individuals is a guy named Dan. And Dan was a guy who had a job, he had a wife, he had kids of his own. And Dan just decided, before he even met me, to spend a couple hours on a Sunday giving up time to sit in a room with middle school boys and talk about faith. And I was at a place where I was coming in skeptical. I had questions. I wasn't sure if I liked dressing up for church, which thank God we don't have to do that anymore. And I met Dan. And to be honest, I was kind of a punk. And it was so annoying because Dan just kept showing up and being nice. It was so frustrating. And as he just showed up every week, and I was being drugged every week, but I just had to be there. And I eventually began realizing that, man, he just loves. He just continues to encourage me. He continues to speak life into me. Something about my week starting to feel different just because I know Dan cares. As I realized that he was just a safe place, I began to open up and ask questions and truly explore faith and explore life. And Dan just tracked with me, and he said that. He said, listen, I'm here. And, fast forward, a lot of who I am today is because of Dan. We still meet together all the time. And he wasn't a pastor. He was a guy with his own family and his own job. He said, I'm just going to give up a couple hours a week. And that time over time has changed my life. And then what's crazy is now over the last couple of years of being a dad, I'm realizing It's changed the way I raise my boys. And so that deposit is truly transforming generations. He just showed up. I think that we say this all the time, the command that Jesus gives us, what it would look like to live as the church. We say, oh, as I have loved you, he says to us, so you must love one another. And the truth of that statement is that it's kind of terrifying, actually. Because Jesus, how did he love us? He leveraged everything. He gave it all. There wasn't judgment, there wasn't condemnation. It didn't matter where we had been or what we had done. Jesus said, I love you. I'm gonna leverage everything I have for your ability to thrive. And then he just asks us to do this. So just love one another like that. Leverage everything for the people around you, the people in your community, the people in your workplaces, in your neighborhoods, the people that don't look like you, or sound like you, or believe like you do, or vote like you do, and not just other adults, but the kids, the students, those who need you. And so that's our call. What would it look like to go out and go, I have things I can leverage. I have things I can give, not just so I can thrive, but some others coming up behind me can have a totally different life than they would otherwise. And what if we committed that together? Let me pray for us. God, I just thank you for a church and a place that believes that the faith of the next generation is worth everything. God, I'm thankful my kids are growing up in a place like this. I am thankful for the countless adults who are saying, yes, I will be a caring adult to show up in kids' lives, whether they are serving or giving. And God, I know you're doing something unique here. I know you're building a unique, safe, and fun place for the next generation. And I'm just thankful to be a part of it. And I pray that you would continue to love on the families in our community in ways that we never could. God, I just pray you would continue to help equip us to do that together. It's in your name I pray. Amen.